Morning. Today is Tuesday, April 23rd, 2019. It's a regular meeting of the Los Angeles Board of Police Commissioners. Madam Secretary, please call the roll.
Good morning. Let the record reflect Commissioner Sobroff, Decker, Bonner, and Figueroa Villa are present, and we have a quorum.
Okay. On the consent agenda items, do we have any commissioner comments other than on 1A where Commissioner Decker has to recuse herself? Do we have any public comments on the consent agenda items?
We have Mr. Herman on each item,
Okay, and that's it?
and that's it.
Okay, Herman? Let's go.
Mr. President, if Commissioner Deckers has to recuse herself, she should leave the room before you start
Okay,
1A.
So, yeah.
So hold public comment
Let's
on
go,
1A.
Herman. Please.
Ms. Decker to excuse herself. Say you treat handicapped people?
Okay, go ahead.
Department's report regarding a donation for professional service. I want to thank all the rank and file who represent professional service. And with their agreement and my agreement, we are a collaborative team of professional research experts, like the rest of you constituents here, along with those a part of other issues. But you see, everybody, the data doesn't reflect what the analyst is recording here as value. Remember, professional service has no dollar value, but it sure hell pays the bills. And I would recommend, as just a suggestion, that we double the amount here for the University of California, otherwise named as University of Trojans, spoiled children, because the policy of doing labs is very important. When they stick a swab in your mouth, and they get DNA. And this can determine who killed who hustled who, and who killed the hustle. But scientific experts, like professionals, like all your rank and files, and our Chief of Police, Mr. Moore, who's a professional, will tell you the facts, that we must accept the issue under prevention of crime and realize that Los Angeles has become the capital of killing.
Okay, B, please. You doing B? Go ahead.
We do have one more comment, sir, on A.
Oh,
We
you
have
do?
Gina Viola.
And are there any other comments on any of the others other than Herman?
No, it's just Mr. Herman on all of them.
Okay, good morning. So I think it's problematic that a sitting commissioner has to be recused for a donation so large. So just for that reason alone, I would ask you to reject it. Also, it's problematic that you discuss it as the prevention of crime and enhancement of police performance management. I think it's pretty clear that police presence does not prevent crime. And I'm going to point you to a shooting that happened August 6th, 2018, in front of Dorsey High School. There were officers all in and around that area when this shooting took place, and a 20-year-old, Harrison Crystal, was shot dead. Police took off in pursuit of the shooter, lost him, didn't catch him, and as far as I understand, they still haven't been caught. And what I find problematic about this is every single eyewitness account attests to the fact that there were police in and around that area, and that there were police in and around that area all the time. So I think it's pretty clear that police presence does not prevent crime. It also doesn't even seem to solve crime, because Harrison's parents still don't have any closure on this, because nothing has been solved. So it's problematic that they set out, they actually saw the crime happen, they lost the offender, and nothing's been done. I see that the reward keeps going up for information in and around this, but what good is police presence if you can't even prevent this from happening, nor solve it or give their families any peace. So I would ask that you reject this donation on those
Thank you.
grounds alone.
Do you have any other public comments on this?
We have no other cards on this item.
Motion for approval of 1A. So move. Second. All in favor? Aye. Anyone opposed? Okay. We can ask Commissioner Decker to come back in, please. Okay, so we'll go to 1B. Mr. Herman?
Mr. Herman on 1B and all the other items.
What? You can if you turn a card in. Go ahead.
Ladies and gentlemen, good morning. This is in relationship to April 16th of 2019 regarding the Los Angeles Police Department Foundation. And before I get started, I'd like to submit these 4 pages as a document to Mr. Michael Moore to follow through in correspondence to the Los Angeles Police Foundation. That is my recommendations and suggestion letter. It's not basically a complaint, it's basically addressing an issue that involves the Los Angeles Police Department in monetary donations. See, when we start to pay people to silence us, it's very effective.
Off topic. This is regarding the
This is regarding
regarding the 150th anniversary. So go ahead.
$13,500, sir.
Yeah. Towards
And,
the,
and when monies is delegated, obligated, and given as a donation, the public should be aware in a itemized agenda how you're spending this money for this foundation, truly. I mean, LAPD is the second highest paid organizations besides myself. You see, and when I support the police, I'm not here to be offensive. I'm here to engage on my social activities to participate. And for this reason, each time I stand here, I feel retaliation and harassment by that gentleman there. Thank
okay,
you.
good.
Jonathan Foster.
Hi, I'm Jonathan Foster. 150th anniversary. Happy anniversary. I personally don't think that any police officer wants to come to work today. We wish that everybody wouldn't break the law. And then certain people made the laws, and then the police have to enforce the laws, and the laws are extremely biased. When it said "we the people," the gas is $4. If it was "we the people," the gas would be 29 cents. So there's a huge problem with what the police do, and you're here going to have a celebration, 150 years. One thing I've noticed, every walk of life has a police department, and it doesn't matter how far back you go. Most archaeology says that roughly 11,000 years ago, a meteorite hit the place and wiped out mankind. Okay, we can't do it 100% like we know, but that's pretty much what we see. We go back 11,000 years and there's a police department. Yeah, so it's been around forever. I'm a kind of person that I would love to go beat up out of some people that have done me wrong, but I don't because I don't want to go to jail because I don't want to talk to a police officer. They keep saying that the police department isn't a deterrent, and yet it actually kind of is because I haven't broke the law. The kind of heinous things I'd like to do to some people, but I keep saying, there is a Jesus, and he told me to forgive, and don't go over there because you have to talk
Let's
to
stay
these.
on topic, please.
Right,
It's about
so
150th anniversary.
150th anniversary. I mean, it's so tainted, though, because it's not we the people. They made special laws so you could get rich. You moved 900 Indian graves so you can get rich. I think you're burning in hell, buddy.
And we have no other cards on this item.
Motion for approval 1B. All in favor? Aye. Anyone opposed? Okay, item number C.
We have Mr. Herman
Okay.
on item C.
When are you coming up?
What's up, my brothers? You see here, we have $17,000 with a surplus of $500 in addition to this police foundation monetary donation. Unfortunately, though, that the training needs to be reevaluated because there's been some serious crimes, criminal activity among these training process because there's just too much excessive force. And training is related to how police interact with the public and decide to want to shoot you ass in the street. So I'm just here to praise the Los Angeles Police Foundation if they could cooperate on the conference that we, the public, have established to forward this monetary donation towards. It's not simple, but there was no department report accepted for this donation according to this agenda here. So, you know, white people like me know better that recommendations for the board's action should be held and dismissed on this concern of mine regarding training. Any inadequate training is a result of the Baltimore police being investigated by the Department of Justice
President, the
for
speaker's on
abuse.
topic.
Off topic.
Well, isn't this in relation to training, sir? When people are abused, they have to get retrained. You know, I understand sometimes I go a little off color, but according to this $17,500 Los Angeles Police Foundation donation, it is a substantial amount of money, and there is no transparency when it comes to the training, and that's what we're calling for,
Okay.
training, because I represent the public,
Let's go to
nigga.
number D now. You're up still.
Me?
Yeah.
On April 17th, 2019, there was a donation totaling $3,100 from Friends of West Los Angeles. I don't know what Friends of West Los Angeles is about, but I'm your friend. I'm here to donate $1 to this relative issue on the report regarding organized retail crimes. See, the conference back in the days of the ORC was specific. And
Mr. President, the speaker's off topic.
I'm reading right out the motherfucking agenda, fool.
Okay, so that's the end of this one. Let's go to number D.
That was D, sir.
Okay.
Dumbass D.
Okay, and, you can sit down now. Thank you.
We're not doing D?
No, I have something else I want to do now. You have a motion for approval of B, C, and D?
B has already been done, sir. It's C and D.
C and D? All in favor? Aye. Mr. Labange, we're out of order. We're going to take a presentation from Mr.
Mr.
Labange.
President, thank you very much, and good morning to all. I was over at the federal court for jury duty and postponed to October, but I was walking down First Street, and there's nothing like the Los Angeles Police Department, so I took a minute to see your smiling faces
Thank you,
and
sir.
say thank you for what you do. On Thursday, we're honoring Mayor Bradley, if I could just ask that for all of you, for his work that he did, and he will be honored with a very famous plaque at the Court of Honor at the Memorial Coliseum. So I wanted to let you know that. In addition to that, I'm working with the Los Angeles Fire Historical Society to create a list of like 20 historic places where recruits to the fire service and quite possibly recruits to the police department could see Los Angeles within the year or two it takes to become an officer or a firefighter. It is a long time, and I just think it's good to know about Los Angeles history. I'm also working with the Community College District to identify bandy camps, old building at Fletcher in San Fernando to be like a city-county school so you can learn about the great history, because the history is so important. And I'm proud, Chief Moore, if you answer this question, I get you Pink's hot dog, whatever you want. Where is Moore Street in Los Angeles? Right off Glendale Boulevard, not far from where Chief Parker lived, over the hill, right there by St. Teresa's Church. 3 Hail Marys and 4 Our Fathers. But that's another story. I will
Mr.
see-
Labange, I'll buy you a Pink's hot dog if you can tell me where Labange Street is in Los Angeles.
We ain't got one.
Well,
but
we
my-
sure
but-
should, man.
But my grandfather did live in 1800s, 1880, at 310 North Main Street.
All right.
And I worked at 200 North Spring Street. Same
Thank
thing.
you, sir, for all you do.
Good, that's good. And also, my other grandfather, LAPD, Metropolitan Division, he finished on 1916 to 1943.
Wow.
And then the Wobblies had a demonstration at the Central, not the Central Park, which was Pershing Square, but up at the Alvera Street. They tore down the American flag, and Big Tom Lernahan walked up, took it from him, and threw it back and said, "There's enough of red in the American flag. Don't do that to our flag." Adios. Au
Thank you,
revoir.
sir.
Good to see you. I'll show you, Chief, that one time.
Visit any time, sir.
See you. Thank you.
Thanks for all you do. Okay, we're on item, we're on item number E.
Mr. Herman,
Mr. Herman?
on 1E.
Dodgers are up to bat. And unfortunately, those involved with this program, as set forth, unpredictably, unconsiderately, and irresponsibly fuck the cadets.
Off topic, next. Let's go to number F.
Mr. Herman, on 1F.
And stay up there, Herman. F. F. You want to combine all your comments, F, G, H, I, and J?
No, sir, I fill out a card on every item like I normally do, so I
Okay,
prefer
go
to
ahead.
take it one step at a time, please. Thank you.
Okay?
So, you see, the Philharmonic Association also has donated $800 to the Los Angeles Police Department for food and recreational activities. And that's a very good thing that the Philharmonic does stuff like this, because disabled people, like elderly people, need the opportunity to express the quality of listening to the Los Angeles Philharmonic when they go to the events. And recreation activities and events are very beneficial, and they set a precedence to the Olympics of the area cadet program. And tell Mr. T-Frank to shut the fuck up because I'm speaking, you fucking asshole. Sit down. So, to approve the department's report, to accept the donation, I am not in opposition, but I am in support. Fuck the police.
On 1G. That was F.
We're going to hold G, H, I, and J until after closed session, because we want to make sure we have a quorum at closed session today. So do we have a motion for approval of, what is it, just F and G?
E and F.
1E and F.
E and
Sorry?
F, sir.
E and F.
Just E and F? Okay.
Yes.
Motion for approval?
So moved.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, so we're going to hold, we will do G, H, I, and J after closed session. Regular agenda items, we have the department's verbal presentation discussion relative to the use of force here in report. Welcome back. Just want to say, over the weekend, or over the last week, I've had an opportunity to go through the 414-page report in its entirety, and what I see is a presentation, clear as a bell, of facts. of statistics, not of interpretations, not of, they lead to solutions, but really this is a wonderful compilation of facts. You don't need Google when you've got this, and I want to thank you for doing it. I think it's something that is very helpful. People can certainly pick out 2 pages and put them in through any glasses they want and say whatever they want. At the end of the day, this is just the facts, and it's much appreciated to have in one place.
Thank you, sir.
Do we have, is there anything else you guys want to say? Or last time we were, the commissioners were going to go through it, come up with their specific questions.
We had some follow-up responses for questions that were asked at the last meeting.
Okay, go ahead.
Good morning. Last week, Commissioners Decker and Bonner asked for follow-up information regarding how do we measure the effect or impact of our training on use of force. I'm sorry, I should have introduced myself. I'm Captain Jonathan Tom. I'm the commanding officer of Critical Incident Review Division, and seated to my left is Dr. Pinnell. She's the Director of Police Training and Education. So the questions that were asked were, how do we measure the effect or impact of our training on use of force? Why have we not achieved the success of other major cities in terms of reductions in officer-involved shootings? Why have our use of force numbers improved? How will we continue to improve, and what is the vision for the future? I will speak on the use of force statistics, and Dr. Pinnell will speak on the department's recent efforts regarding training and where we are headed in the future. Regarding how we measure the effect or impact of our training on use of force, in October of 2016, the department delineated the requirement for de-escalation and use of force tactics directive number 16, titled Tactical De-Escalation. The directive defined tactical de-escalation as the use of techniques to reduce the intensity of an encounter with a suspect and enable an officer to have additional options to gain voluntary compliance or mitigate the need to use a higher level of force while maintaining control of a situation. The directive went on to describe the patrol acronym, which I can go into if you'd like, but it was meant to remind officers of techniques that have been proven to reduce or mitigate the use of force. We know that impacts to changes in policy and training can really only be measured over the long term. It takes over a year to train the department in one course, and the true effect of policy changes cannot be gauged in the short term. Consequently, the results we are seeing now are built on the consistent and comprehensive focus that was started in 2016 and prior. We can and do, however, make inferences that the change in de-escalation policy, coupled with significant changes in training and other policy, would appear to be making a difference, as a review of our 2018 uses of force in comparison to 2017 revealed significant reductions in lethal and less lethal use of force. Additionally, upon further examination, there were significant differences between 2018 and 17 when it came to the number of officers responding to and utilizing force and the types of force that were used in our non-categorical use of force. The department recognizes that we cannot conclude too much from an analysis of change from one year to the next. However, we are encouraged by the numbers and believe the statistics tend to show that we're moving in the right direction. We nevertheless are constantly examining our training and uses of force in order to look for more effective methods to address uses of force issues. In 2018, officers contacted approximately 86,000 more people and experienced a 6% increase in attacks on officers, including a 35% increase in attacks on officers with edged weapons. Despite contacting more people and being attacked more, the department experienced 33 total officer-involved shootings, which was the second lowest number of the last 30 years. And as compared to 2017, there was a 25% reduction in the number of officer-involved shootings, 56% reduction in the number of officers discharging their weapons, 49% reduction in the number of total rounds fired, and there were no incidents involving 4 or more shooters as compared to 9 incidents in 2017. There was also a 44% reduction in the number of officer-involved shootings involving suspects armed with edged weapons. Regarding our non-categorical uses of force, there were 2,126 non-categorical uses of force, which again, despite contacting 86,000 more people, was only 3 more than in 2017. Overall, there was a 39% reduction in the amount of less lethal force used as compared to 2017, which means that we used the taser, beanbag shotgun, and OC spray 316 less times than in 2017. Significantly, in 2018, department personnel used less lethal force on 100 suspects that were armed with weapons. Each of these incidents had the potential to escalate to the use of lethal force, and yet were resolved through de-escalation and the use of less lethal force. Of these 100 incidents, 46 involved an edged weapon, 39 involved an impact device, and numerous other weapons, including 5 firearms. It was interesting to note that there were 996 or 10% more officers responding to non-categorical use of force incidents in 2018 than 2017. That was
You're disrupting the meeting by holding your hands up in front of the camera. That's your last warning. Please stop disrupting the meeting. Okay.
There were also 818 or 11% more officers using force in those non-categorical uses of force, despite there being almost the same number of non-categoricals in 2018 and 17. These additional officers resulted in approximately 5% more non-lethal force being utilized, non-lethal force being everything from firm grips resulting in injury or complaint of injury to body weight takedowns and strikes. However, almost all of the additional force was on the lower spectrum of use of force, i.e. firm grip, body weight, and miscellaneous force. And it resulted in 119 or 7% less suspects being injured. This decrease in suspect injuries was in contradiction to the trend of 4% and 5% increases in suspect injuries in 2016 and 17, respectively. Again, these statistics tend to show that we are contacting more people, having similar numbers of uses of force, and utilizing lower levels of force, which is resulting in less injury to the suspects. It is too early to draw definitive conclusions, but it is encouraging, as it would appear that officers are utilizing de-escalation techniques to bring more resources to the scene while at the same time using a reduced amount of lethal and less lethal force. Regarding why we have not achieved the success of other major cities in terms of reductions in officer-involved shootings, there are numerous variables that may have led to the success of other departments. However, it has been difficult to draw definitive conclusions with the information we have available. The department has been successful in reducing officer-involved shootings, and although not at the same rate as New York, Chicago, Philadelphia, Houston, and Los Angeles County sheriffs, we don't know the quality and quantity of their contacts with the public. And in comparison to New York, Chicago, Philadelphia, and Houston, Los Angeles had the lowest number of murders, the second lowest per capita murder rate, the fourth lowest violent crime rate per capita, the second highest number of shootings versus Chicago, and the third highest number of sworn officers. In looking at how LAPD officer-involved shootings compared to the other 5 large police agencies, LAPD had the highest number of officer-involved shootings, the largest numerical decrease with 11 less officer-involved shootings in 2018. The second highest percentage decrease of 25%, slightly behind New York Police Department with 26%, but they only had a reduction of five less officer-involved shootings. LAPD had an 18.5% reduction in officer-involved shootings as compared to the average of the previous 4 years. Our average previously was 40.5. Chicago had a 34% reduction. Sheriffs had a 27% reduction. New York PD had a 47% reduction, Houston 41%, and Philadelphia 50% reduction. LAPD's largest year-to-year reduction in officer-involved shootings occurred in 2018, while all other agencies in the group had their largest decreases in 2017. The largest being 43% reduction in Philadelphia from 23 to 13. In an attempt to conduct an adequate analysis, we conducted a query of publicly available information from each of the agencies and reached out to the agencies themselves. At the time of this presentation, we were not able to obtain information from all of the agencies, and from the ones that did provide information, we were unable to confirm that the numbers presented to us were capturing information the same way that the LAPD does, because different departments do not share uniform standards for collecting and reporting information. We also received anecdotal information as well as information gleaned from news reports regarding agencies' perceived reasons for the reduction in their officer-involved shootings. Based on the information received, similar to what we have done, our peer agencies have all implemented scenario-based training that emphasizes de-escalation, implemented use of force policy changes, enhanced their oversight of uses of force, and with the exception of the Sheriff's Department, have mandated the wearing of body-worn video cameras. We will continue to reach out to these other agencies in an attempt to learn more about what they have done and continue to do to reduce officer-involved shootings with the intent to learn their best practices. And I'll now turn it over to Dr. Pinnell.
Morning.
Good morning. I have the privilege and opportunity to speak to the thread of training that has gone throughout this whole report from 2014 through 2018. We use this report every year as a training needs assessment. When we look at where we need to train for the future, we look at where we've been, and fortunately that we have progress going in the right direction, but I do think we have to take a step back to look where we were at 2014, where we had multiple rounds and multiple shooters. And that pushed the department at that time into a significant self-examination and research onto what are we doing, every aspect of qualification and how we train. We changed up at that time some of our qualifications and how we were doing those. And we did a department-wide effort. There was a preservation of life training that we had the command staff, and at the highest levels of the department, we ensured everyone in the department had a clear message on the redirection that we were taking at that time. Across the nation in 2015 as well, there were significant discussions regarding de-escalation and multiple different things, including procedural justice. And the President's task force came out in 2015, giving us some really good guidelines on best practices. At that time as well, the Inspector General's office did a very comprehensive report that came out in 2016 on national best practices. So we ended up looking at multiple documents, multiple agencies, looking for any possible way that we could get better. But I do think one of the best things that we did was putting out the tactical directive on de-escalation in 2016. When we did our own self-examination, what we looked to and even heard from ourselves, and we're training on de-escalation, but if you talk to any different officer, sometimes you got different variations of what that meant. So defining it and coming up with 6 real programmatic things that need to happen in a de-escalation process: planning, assessment, how we use time. Sometimes we have to speed it up, sometimes we have to slow it down to take cover. But even the statistics that we're seeing on more officers being involved reflects our efforts to have more, to take our time and to call for backup when needed and get a different kind of response, a coordinated response. So at the same time as we put out a directive that helped us have a different lexicon around de-escalation, it helped in our department just to have that agreement, but then as we wove it into every other aspect. So what we did that was somewhat different than I think some other agencies is that it's not just a training effort. It's not a one-day training piece. It's a systematic and comprehensive effort throughout every rank and structure of the department. So let me kind of unwrap that a little further. The tactical de-escalation directive came out in 2016. And the next year in the fall, or in the spring, we updated the use of force policy at the direction of the Police Commission to incorporate de-escalation. So then we started to see that weave, not just in training, but in the practical aspects of department functioning. So we saw it in use of force boards. We saw it in our interviews as we talked to officers and asked them about what they were doing to de-escalate. We started seeing this moved into roll call training and into discussions at various levels. As the Director of Police Training, we looked at every use of force, any class that contained use of force. We looked to see where we need to incorporate de-escalation. And the thing that we did differently, I think, particularly in this effort, that is starting to gain some momentum for us, is that we didn't just say, here, review this piece of paper. We made learning activities and tabletop scenarios and examined body camera footage and helped people to look at the strengths and weaknesses of how they have responded. Additionally, after every use of force, when we have a general training update that is required after every use of force, we incorporated de-escalation into one of the mandated topics to be covered in after a use of force. So, and then after that, we've incorporated de-escalation into 58 different courses. Some places more expansive than others, but it would be very hard to go through almost any department training today and not have some kind of discussion on de-escalation. The other thing that we've done in our promotional schools is to really enhance how each layer of the department takes on the responsibility in the discussion of de-escalation. So we've even incorporated de-escalation into questions on promotional exams, but you'll also find them as questions as a part of their interviews. So everyone is getting more well-versed at being able to discuss it, but also to recognize that everyone has a different role in that, all the way up to commanding officers. And just recently, we did another course in command development where we are training the up-and-coming command officers and talking about de-escalation is just not the responsibility of the frontline officer. We can't have the frontline officer be the only one discussing how we all play a role in de-escalation. So you'll hear commanding officers understand that they have a role to get good information out to their community members and to respond to them with their senior lead officers and to help mitigate any given scenario or crisis that is happening in their division to help the community de-escalate as well. So in that, I'm trying to think of the other pieces that we've done. So since that information came out in 2016, we've had 3 comprehensive courses, and this is a shift that we've done in department training. Prior to 2016, much of our update training was being done on a divisional level or distributed throughout the department. In 2016, we took on the ownership at training to create a one-day, sometimes 9 or 10-hour course relative to a use of force update. So in 2016, we actually trained 8,826 officers on the use of force update. And in that situation, we put them into scenarios. And much of what we've learned across the nation is that classroom learning alone is not going to be sufficient. And so we have to get people to practice and try out and actually make mistakes in training and be corrected. So how we debrief these situations become very critical. Following the use of force update, where we're asking officers to go out in partners, the next training that we did was integrating communication, de-escalation, and crowd control. So looking at a more coordinated response, but still incorporating de-escalation into how does that look when you have crowds of people responding, and how do we make sure that we're not escalating a situation when people have their rights to protest or to march or whatever the incident that is relative to crowd control. So in that course, we put through 7,000 officers, and that was just finished up in January of this year. Our next course and what you should see is that each of these courses are building on the last one. And so this course that we're putting together now is on command and control. And so the command and control course will again revisit our mindset and thinking around use of force, but also coordinated efforts. When we have multiple officers responding, does everyone have a role, and what is the role that they're taking? In the last couple of years as well, we've had the opportunity to train our officers using the 40 millimeter. So we've had new less lethal options to incorporate into our responses, as well as body camera and understanding both how to utilize that. We have many things that we're asking our officers to do on every stop that they have, incorporating body camera, digital in-car video. We also have the new AFDR, and we also have their responsiveness to the calls of that are on their MDC. So coordinating all those efforts and making sure that everyone has a role and that it's synergistic in its response. I think what we see overall, though, is we're moving in the right direction. And when we talk about what's our vision, we want to keep building on each training that we've done, as opposed to having a gap of time where we've gone then to a decentralized model. I think the other key thing that you would see that we've done since 2016 is the addition of PSL 1, and now we're starting with PSL 2. So just a couple things to say about that. In that course of time, since 2016, we have now trained 1,100 officers. So new officers who have come in, they've received their academy training, they have then gone through the field training officer course, 11 months in the field, and then have come in to do the police sciences and leadership program. Within that, we are revisiting key topics, national topics, implicit bias, image and impression management, peak performance, understanding, the wear and tear of a 312 on your body, and how to keep peak performance going when you are sleep deprived or hungry. investigative skills, interviewing, emotional intelligence in special populations, looking how we respond to diverse groups of people. Use of force review, legal review, de-escalation, building community trust. Every officer who comes through that program will do a community trust building presentation at the end of that course. And so now we've had 1,100 of those officers go through that training. In addition, they have all received the mental health intervention training. So, and I think I have mentioned this in the past, but right now we are on the trajectory to ensure that all of our patrol officers have received mental health intervention training of the 40-hour course. Sometimes we tend to think of that as that's a mental health course, but it's also a de-escalation course. So again, that course is full of scenarios and discussions around de-escalation. What can we do when we see someone who is in crisis? The thing that actually makes our mental health intervention training so much more successful is the coordination and partnership with the Department of Mental Health. The Department of Mental Health helps facilitate that course. They teach it, but they are also co-responders with us out in the field. And so our officers see them in training, but they also see them out in the field. And so that linkage has become critical. The way that the Department of Mental Health has also responded to help us have more options with people who have a mental illness is exceedingly helpful. Many times officers can become frustrated at the lack of resources that are available to assist people with mental illness. And you will often hear that discussion in our department around having a mental illness is not a crime. So how do we help people and leverage other resources when some of those resources are already taxed as well? So that coordinated effort that we see with the mental health intervention training, roughly right now they've trained 2,400 and some officers. Again, in the next 2 years, I would anticipate that all of our patrol officers will have gone through that training. To ensure that it's not just the frontline officers, I just want to reassure you, it's also our field training officers, because we want to make sure the ones who are training, the newest officers, have had the same level of training. We have also made sure that our reset and hope officers have received that training, and then as we can, we never have an empty seat in that course. And it's continued to have, just continued to build really a strong connection with the Department of Mental Health. So I think on the de-escalation piece, we will continue as we get new courses to come in, and they go through both my shop for that evaluation of how to get it post-approved or department approved. We are always looking, even when new courses come to us, sometimes people don't think there might be a nexus with the de-escalation. We look through that patrol acronym and we find places to make sure that those connections are reinforced throughout department training. I think the one thing I would want to emphasize is that we continue to look to, although we have a trajectory that we're on and a plan that we are working, we continue to look to other agencies to see what else is being done. We see many of other agencies struggling with the challenges of mental health and homelessness that we are struggling with. And so to that end, in January 31st, I believe, we had the Police Executive Research Forum, which is a national kind of think tank and discussion group that pulls other agencies together. They came and we hosted them here in Los Angeles in January to bring a wide range of law enforcement leaders to Los Angeles and to hear from them on what they're doing, and especially around less lethal. That particular symposium was a less lethal symposium, and looking at what other options we have. I think there's kind of, within our core values is quality through continuous improvement. And, we will continue to pull on that. And thank you to also the Inspector General. The reports that they've shared and the things that they've given back to us have helped us to continually shape. We're trying to not wait until you get the report, but as soon as we hear something or get feedback, we are weaving that into our response within training.
Great. Commissioner, any questions? Commissioner Decker.
Just briefly, First of all, thank you very much for that detailed presentation today, and thank you for the report. I continued not just reading it, but looking at other cities, and I have to note yet again that I have not found any other police department that provides as much detail and as much data on use of force, and particularly in the short amount of time that this has been released for 2018. I realize an impressive amount of work has gone into this, so I do want to thank the department and everyone who helped compile this. Secondly, I'd like to thank you for today's presentations. I know last week we threw a lot of questions at you, some of which involved getting information from other cities and other departments, which is not within your control, as you noted. But I do thank you for the information you were able to obtain, and for what you've been able to share thus far today. It's very helpful. And finally, I just want to note that my questions today all revolved around where we go from here. And your presentation today answered my questions in terms of what are our next steps, how do we improve further based upon the information that's been provided in this report. So I thank you for that detailed presentation. It certainly helped me in understanding our pathway forward. I do acknowledge that the report highlights much progress has been made, but this is a department that always wants to improve, and I wanted to hear more about the pathway forward. So thank you both for doing that today. I appreciate it.
Commissioner Bonner.
Thank you. First, by the way, just one factual question about the data in the report. At the last meeting and during the public comment period, there was a question about whether the data included uses of force that may have occurred in the jails, in any of the jails. Do you know the answer to that question?
Sir, any use of force by department personnel would be involved in this report. They
Okay.
all get captured in the same database for teams.
Were any of the incidences that were reported here then, I may have missed this, and forgive me if that's the case, but were any of the incidences reported this past year an incident that occurred in a jail?
You're asking about specific uses of force that occurred in the jails?
Yes, yes, Commissioner, we can give you the exact by command reportable use of force. And the department has one reportable use of force standard that every employee is subject to. And in each instance of it being used, there's an investigation that is standardized as well. It is in the jail setting, the difference is should there be an in-custody death, and there's an additional set of protocols. But I don't know that we have the breakdown today by command, but we certainly, Critical Incident Review Division has the numbers, and on the profiles in the CompStat profile, they'll have that number as well.
Sure. Thank you. Thank you. And the next, I think that question or the follow-up on that, and probably the next two, are things that, in my view, you can, I would ask that you maybe plan to some further follow-up with the subcommittee, the Use Force Subcommittee,
Yes,
just by way of information. And so going back to the first comment on the mechanisms in place to measure the impact of training and so on, and you made the point, I think, which is well taken, that it requires a longer-term look. I think I fully captured, with specificity about, the how part of that in terms of exactly how some of that impact is measured. And again, and if you have a comment now, it's fine, but if not, I'd just ask that it be something that we walk through in a little more detail with the subcommittee at the appropriate time.
I can say that we have several partnerships that we move forward with. I work with a professional advisory committee of members of kind of the academic world, and we kind of leverage their resources to ask them sometimes to do literature reviews or to help us with assessments and evaluations. We have another effort that is in conjunction with Mr. Alakhan's office, working at an assessment for this upcoming use command and control course. As we get more definition around that, but it's going to go through a stringent academic process as well. And so what I have seen in the last 14 years as Director of Police Training is that our department has become more and more receptive to what kind of research we could do. And I think there was a time in law enforcement where that was kind of held at bay or not engaged in the same way. And I'm really both encouraged and excited to see where we can go as we look in and leverage those resources to help us get better.
Okay, and so I think it'll be a good topic of discussion at a future subcommittee meeting to just appreciate that in a little more detail. So I appreciate that. On the, you mentioned there was a lot of discussion of the de-escalation policy, and I think you mentioned that this report itself is looked at as a training needs assessment tool, and so I appreciate that. One question is, you mentioned also that the de-escalation is trained on and talked about at every level of command from, officer on up. Does it start in the academy? I mean, is it part of the curriculum there? Can you comment on that
Absolutely.
briefly?
It helps when our source documents are all consistent because we use those all the way from the very first officer coming in. Our reserves would get that training. We have that even in our cadet training as well. So we utilize that as a framework throughout every aspect of the department.
Okay, and in terms of the current your report and de-escalation, do we know if there were, with regard to those incidences where there was a use of force, do we know in those incidences whether there was de-escalation that was attempted or applied and maybe was unsuccessful?
I'm not exactly sure about every case that was used here, although I will say that we are looking at body camera footage, and what we have started implementing in 2019 is that we take body camera footage and we'll use that for a roll call training to highlight here's what good de-escalation looks like and here's how these officers actually implemented and used it. So we're trying to exponentially help the conversation be present all the time, but also that we put it in front of officers. This is what it looks like when it's done cohesively and well. I will say that after those shootings, however, they do go through that general training update, and they will have de-escalation as a mandatory topic that is reviewed with some of our experts.
Let me go back, I believe, to that question relative to each non-categorical use of force as well as the categorical use of force. Is de-escalation, the concept of de-escalation, evaluated as to the officer's use or employment of it? Is that the nature?
No. What I'm asking is, and we look now at the data that's incorporated in the report that we're prepared to approve today. Do we know, when we look at that set of incidences that involve use of force, do we know how many of those, for example, was there? Yeah, we can tell in those cases was de-escalation attempted in every case, and it just was successful in some and not in the others.
I'll refer this to a critical incident. I think the sheer volume in this short period of time, and recognizing that towards the latter half of the year, many of those uses of force have not been fully adjudicated, that I don't know that that's a question that we can answer at this point.
Fair enough.
But I would look to Mr. Chief Peters or Captain Thomas to respond to that.
And let me also say before you comment, Chief Peters, that again, I think as hopefully you're capturing some of my questions here, it's not the expectation that there's an answer to every question readily available today. There's a lot of information in a 400-page report, which is why some of these areas that I think maybe deserve a little more thoughtful consideration or a deeper dive. That's why I'm suggesting that they be the topic of a subcommittee meeting so that we can discuss them further and then decide which, if any, are appropriate to bring back to the commission and public.
Absolutely, Commissioner. Looking forward to doing that and working with you on that piece. Good morning, John Peters, the Director of the Office of Support Services. I just wanted to comment a little bit on your question relative to the de-escalation and the consideration or the evaluation. So as the chairman of the Use of Force Board, on every categorical use of force that we review, part of the presentation that is required from the commanding officer that presents it to us at the board is to cover the elements of de-escalation that occurred or didn't occur in their analysis of the incident. Now, understanding the whole conversation of de-escalation going back to the beginning, and when we sent people back to New Orleans and worked with people all around the country to come up with the standard that started with PERF, the ICAT, the Integrating Communication and Tactics, that what de-escalation was intended to primarily deal with is not a situation when somebody pulls a gun and is shooting at an officer necessarily. That's immediate reaction to dealing with it. But was the multiple incidents that we are seeing around the country with people with edged weapons, blunt instruments that were suffering from mental illness, under the influence of some narcotic or other substance. How do we better manage those situations? And so when those issues are appropriate in these categorical use of force, the captains are actually absolutely required to walk through that patrol acronym and to tell us in their analysis whether it applied or not. So we look at that very closely.
So looking at that further, though, to look at the data and dig into it and look for coming up with a survey, for instance, scale to understand evidence of de-escalation or absence of thereof, I think it's a great opportunity for the department. As you said, we move quickly to get the facts out. The analysis that follows, some of it just pops right out at you. Others is more nuanced, and we look forward to working with the commissioner, with Commission Subcommittee in defining a framework that makes that achievable within a reasonable period of time, i.e. 3 to 6 months. One of the nuances about this is that we have seen since this conversation beginning in 2014, we have taken each of the steps that you've seen have been the result of what we're experiencing that year or the year before, and for instance, this last year, the 2017 report showed us an increased number of officers involved, increased number of rounds. So that's where, and the impact or less than desired impact of less lethal systems. What flowed from that into 2018 and now into 2019 has been adjustments and steps. But I think that a more systematic review, perhaps even with a university partner that could look at this over a period of time and see whether or not those adjustments that we've made are seeing a change in when we start doing scores, if you will, on individuals' uses of force. Are they evidenced, and is there a correlation? Can you even see, statistically, is it something that appears to have some influence or that supports the theory that there's this impact? So I think helping us with that in a subcommittee setting would be helpful for us.
Okay, I appreciate that, because I think one of our collective goals, as Commissioner Decker commented extensively about how much data is here and what an outlier the department is in that regard in terms of generating it. And my view that we should not look at it simply as a look back. Every year that's one valuable opportunity, but we should be looking for opportunities to use the data to influence and change, things as we're going forward as well. So I look forward to that discussion. Just a couple others here quickly. One was also just on the point of using the report as a training needs assessment. Are there training initiatives that are either planned or underway now that are intended to further improve the statistics for the current year?
Well, I would say we continually are looking at those 58 courses where we've enhanced. One of the things I didn't mention is one of the things that we created was a instructor guidebook on de-escalation. And we actually retrained our instructors how to teach on this and how to teach it through scenarios. And so it's kind of systematically gone through. It's not that we just added a piece of paper or a new tabletop activity. We are pushing our instructors to get more and more out of our officers when they're in training, and finding that they're very engaged when they're in training, and that they're very responsive to the new training that we're putting out.
Dr. Purnell, on a corporate-wide, department-wide basis, why don't we revisit the command and control? I believe what the commissioner is asking is, going forward, what is a major element of our training in regards to efforts to reduce the use of deadly force and the overall use of force overall?
Precisely.
Well, I do think that the new command and control course, where we're putting people through 3 different kind of scenario environments, is critical because it's the coordinated effort. So if you think of the use of force update, maybe you looked a little closer at the individual officer and their partner. Now we're expanding to how do we coordinate officers when we have 3 and 4 additional units respond, and if we're asking them to incorporate other resources as a better response for de-escalation, then making sure that everyone has a role and is contributing to that. So I fully anticipate in that next year, as we get a better response from the command and control course, that we will see that.
There's two other things that I'd just like to mention in terms of things that we're moving forward with. The standardized roll call training is something that we're reinstituting. This is something that we had in the past that the department's gotten away from a number of reasons, but we're reinstituting that. And a part of that standardized roll call training that will go out to each command and each watch, they'll be required to cover certain topics, and those topics will be the de-escalation, procedural justice, some of the things that we've talked about here today. The second thing is we're getting ready to launch, working with a couple of leading researchers, criminologists on use of force that are looking at officer perception to danger, essentially, and threat, and they have come up with a tool and instrument to and working in conjunction with our command and control scenarios, at what point the officers are perceiving threat, and then they fill out a questionnaire relative to that, and then they're doing some studies to help us understand that piece a little bit better. That will go to our continued efforts with de-escalation.
Excellent. The last thing that I would raise, and this may be, and you can first tell me what if any relationship it has to the use of force data, because it may not, but I would just put it out for something I think is worth some consideration, and that relates to what's referred to as the public contacts snapshot data that's on the website, and in my view, I think we should take a look to see if it can be presented in a more user-friendly format. That would be one thing I'd ask you to look at. And along those lines, I think it's worth considering whether that data can, in some way, be broken out in a manner that's consistent with how the data is reported in the use of force report. So I just, if there's an answer now as to whether that's completely unrelated or perhaps there is some relationship, you can maybe comment on that. But if not, I'd just add that to the list of something that we'll want to discuss with the subcommittee.
We'll follow up, sir.
Okay. Thank you.
If I could just really quickly, I just wanted to reference your question regarding custody. So the custody officers were involved in 4% of our total non-categorical uses of force, and there was a 19% reduction from 2017.
Good.
So we do capture information regarding the uses of force. So the number? So we had a 19% reduction in the number of custodial officers or officers assigned to Custody Services Division.
Rate of change from the previous year on
The total for 2018 was 4%.
percentage, the proportionality of all these non-categorical custody services represented 4%.
4% of the officers, personnel involved, and in 2017 there were 5%. So there was a
Commissioner
reduction.
Decker?
And I'll just want to add something, Dr. Parnell, in terms of your training and how it has permeated through the department. Yesterday, I was invited to attend divisional training out at Mission and sat through a portion of it, and I'll say that they talked about de-escalation, trained on de-escalation using different scenarios, and then the officers presented different scenarios that they had encountered. So I wanted to let you know that we're talking sergeants, patrol officers. It was very impressive to see that the officers were training on that level, having detailed conversations about it, and it was very heartening. So your training is certainly reaching the ranks that you intend. Thank you.
Good. Do we have public comments on 2A?
Yes, sir, we have 8 cards.
Okay.
We have Mr. Herman, Jonathan Foster, and Mary Ann.
Problematic. My concern deals with Holland versus Harrington, 268F, 3D, 1179, 1192 of the 10th Circuit, 2001, explaining that officers pointing a firearm involves immediate threat of deadly force. and should be predicted on at least a perceived risk of injury or danger to people in society based upon what officers know at the time. And this is because throughout the report of mental illness, which includes substance use disorders, there has been a rise of unnecessary use of deadly force, madam. So statistically, your TMU is incorrect. And the public knows that. That's why they're going to speak out regarding failure to obey issues, disregard for disorderly conduct, and the community members' fears from problematic police abuse and illegal use of force under the color of authority. So let me not egg you on as well, but again, you must understand that such use of force against vulnerable groups of people, such as individuals like myself, who are not a threat, but reflect officers' aggressive and sometimes commissions aggressive assault and attack to one's mental health, is problematic. So as I said in the past, fuck you, Steve Sobroff.
Next speaker.
Hi, I'm Jonathan Foster. I come out of a family with 61 straight consecutive years in the United States military. I have an MP in the family, and I grew up on Army bases. The problem is this non-categorical use of force from the audit of 2018, and this is a Supreme Court decision. This is the problem. And it sets the legal standard used to determine the lawfulness of a use of force in the First Amendment, and it's a bunch of... And it says Graham versus the Connor, quote, the reasonableness of a particular use of force must be judged from the perspective of a reasonable officer on the scene rather than with 20/20 vision hindsight, period. The calculus of the reasonableness must be embodied allowance for the fact that the police officers are often forced to make split-second judgments in circumstances that are tense, uncertain, rapidly evolving about the amount of force that is necessary in a particular situation, period. The test of reasonableness is not capable of precise definition or mechanical application, which is a lie. See if I can get through this. It's a bunch of hard work. I know you're doing hard work. De-escalation hasn't happened in 150 years. They're finally getting to it, okay? And this needs to be decided by the people, not the Supreme Court. And we could talk about this every day, every week, every month, and you're not. That's also the problem. Every police officer needs a drug screen because sugar is a neurotoxin. They put these rats in there, had eaten sugar once in a little bowl, and the rat without sugar got right on the plant, the little thing you could get out of the water. The other rat is running around like this, doesn't know where to go. Ate sugar once. Off topic to shoot somebody that hasn't shot at the police. Do you know that's off topic?
Next.
You know, like looking at this where the numbers are still really, really outrageous, right? I know we want to pat ourselves on the back for what, 4% or something ridiculous. And then when we put together Long Beach and sheriffs and LA, and are we putting all those numbers together when we compare ourselves to other major metropolitan areas? Are we even more number one than we think? And so what I wanted to say is, like, if we're looking at de-escalation, how about if we stop throwing money at it, which is a real capitalist standard response that we have, throw money, more training at things that clearly don't work. They've not worked. And so definition of insanity, right? How about if we put the money into mental health professionals to respond to things? 2 for 1 officer. And then stop having officers be the freaking escort for everybody. Somebody in my complex can't breathe and an ambulance responds and there's a freaking escort of police. That's escalating. That is escalating in and of itself. Stop over-policing communities. That's escalating. Being up somebody's yin yang all the time, trying to wait for them to do something wrong, is escalating. Police uniforms are just inherently escalating, particularly in response to mental health folks who probably have trauma behind policing and jailing. Stop accepting the purchase or stop accepting the gift or purchase of Homeland Security and creating this militarized situation that rolls into our neighborhoods. I'm white, middle class. It's not long before it's rolling into mine. I'm not stupid. It's just. I'll just leave it there.
Thank you.
The next three speakers, Gina Viola, George Bazzetti, and Lauren Brock.
So, just the report alone, Mr. Soboroff, you called it a wonderful compilation of facts. I see lots of promo pictures, and I see lots of offensive things to family members who have been killed by police in this report. Also, every single one of these for 2018 was presided over by Officer Jeff Nolte, who now has a criminal past of his own. So I'm not sure how we can take anything in this report with a grain of salt, just given that fact alone. And I haven't heard you ask about that or speak to that at all in the 2 weeks that this has been on the agenda. So I'm wondering where you are with that. Albert Ramon Dorsey was naked in a shower at the gym at 24 Hour Fitness and was killed, unarmed. He didn't have a blunt object. He didn't have anything. Naked in the shower. That's in this report. Grishario Mack having a mental episode in the mall. That's another person that's in this report. And we had another mall shooting this year where you evacuated the Century City Mall because it's a white mall. So you evacuated that mall. Officers didn't go in guns blazing like they did in the Crenshaw Mall, where Grishario Mack was killed. So these things are in this report. Also, I want to go on record again about just the terminology, officer-involved shooting. It is very misleading to the public when you call it that. It's leading the public to believe an officer has been shot. You need to change that terminology to officer shoots civilian so that people start paying attention to what's going on in the city.
George Bazzetti, followed by Lauren Brock and John Avalos.
Lauren, go ahead. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your in-depth, detailed report. It was sweet. All of the talk of de-escalation, it sounds incredible. Maybe it happens. I don't know. But when I look at like what you spoke about, Albert Ramon Dorsey, and what happened in that 24-hour fitness and how no backup was called until after he was shot dead and unarmed, I just want to know what's being happened in those instances. I want to know, what are we doing to fix that? I'd like to be able to review the body cam footage, but both officers removed their body cameras prior to discharging their firearms on an unarmed man.
That's your last warning. I just didn't know who it was, but I've heard 3 times. So
I want to know what's being
just a
done
sec.
in that case.
We'll stop the clock for a sec, okay?
Okay.
You need to give her back time.
Just a second. So you, Madam, can speak whatever you want to speak during public comment, but what you can't do is disrupt the meeting. Please don't disrupt the meeting. If you do it again, I'm going to ask you to leave. Okay?
Your 10 seconds.
Go ahead.
Your 10 seconds.
Go ahead.
Your 10 seconds.
Mr. Bazzetti, will you stop
Robert's Rules of
disrupting
Order.
the meeting?
You're out of Robert's Rules of Order.
I'm going to ask you to leave. I'm going to ask you to leave the meeting. I gave you a warning. You can leave the meeting. Go ahead.
I'd like to know what's being done in that
Mr.
case.
Bazzetti, you can leave the meeting.
I think
You declared war on us in the paper, didn't you?
Go ahead.
I'd like to know what's being done in that case. I think we know from experience that we can't count on Jackie Lacey to hold officers accountable. I think oftentimes people forget that the homeless in our city are actual human beings and that many of them are suffering from serious mental illness. The mayor proposed a budget of $420 million for homeless and $348 million for street repairs. That shows what little priority the mayor has for our actual humans. Those allocating our funds are truly, and the actual priority that those allocating our funds truly place on human life, which then makes me question the actual value that the mayor has for our officers. It shouldn't be their responsibility. It shouldn't be the responsibility of the officers' lives, because at the end of the day, taking a human life should not be something that any officer who has a desire to protect and serve should have to go home with and live on their hearts.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
We have John Avalos, followed by Carrie and Tina
Mr. Avalos.
Grubo.
Morning,
Hi,
sir.
everybody. Hi. I've been coming every week, but I still feel so ignorant. I'm working class. I'm not even middle class.
Mr. President, if you could hold the speaker's time. Mr. Bezzetti is disrupting the meeting. He's not leaving as instructed.
Well, I have your letter that says that you can commit any crime you want, and that's why you threw me out the last
For the record, Mr. Bezzetti continues to disrupt the meeting, Mr. President.
And you can be a bunch of fool lawbreakers all you want. It's perfectly fine.
Go ahead, sir.
Can I start all over at 0?
If you're at 0, no, you want to start at 2
Wherever,
minutes.
whatever, at 1.
Start him at 2 minutes.
All right.
Aye.
Sorry
Yeah,
for
so
the
like I was
disruption.
saying, I'm not middle class, like the woman who spoke earlier. I'm lower middle class, working class. Usually I come to the meetings in my Dickies. Now, I was here last week. Is this the same report from last week? That wonderful, colorful brochure? Toxicology. There's a page on toxicology in that report. But I want to know, do you give regular drug testing for the police? Where can I find that out? I'm going to start doing research on that. How often is there drug testing for the police? Right? We don't even know. I've been coming often, and I still have all these questions. I'm so ignorant.
Sir,
You
if
all
you-
keep
sir,
us so ignorant.
If you could hold his time, sir. Sir, if you would talk to Mr. Lieutenant Brian Rafish, any question you have, we will respond
Nice.
to. Thank you.
Okay, and then the woman mentioned the body cams. I was at the trial for Jesse Romero every day. And that officer, it wasn't even a matter of de-escalation. They came in escalating as if they were at war. These 2 young kids were in the back, and some landlord called, oh, these kids are in the back smoking weed. That's all those gang officers needed. They came in like war. There was no thing of escalating, de-escalating, I mean. They came already escalated. Were they on drugs or what? And then that same officer that chased those boys down that busy avenue in Boyle Heights, who cares? It's Boyle Heights, all the Chicanos live there. Who cares? We can chase these kids with guns throughout these streets. Anyway, that officer that shot the kid took the body cam. He made sure that the body cam was hidden before he shot. And that was very evident in the trial. Those issues never came up anymore. So you talk about body cams, and then I still don't know if officers are able to turn their body cams on or off whenever they feel like it, Mr. Moore. I still don't know this.
Next speaker, please.
Next speaker is Carrie.
Somebody left a pin.
Good morning. My name's Carrie Ungerman. I've also been coming for the last number of months. I don't make it every week, but I try. And one of the things I noticed when the data was given today, there didn't seem to be a breakdown by race of the people included in it in the officer-involved shootings. So I was just curious about that, and maybe it's there. I didn't read the
It
report.
is.
The de-escal.
In many places it is.
Okay, thank you. And de-escalation, I'm wondering about de-escalation. Because, that might be described in the report too, but I believe that if it doesn't go hand in hand with examining whiteness and white supremacy in our country, not white supremacists, but white supremacy and how all our laws are made, that's one thing that needs to be done. But also, each person examining their unexamined, internalized race bias, because we all have it. We all have it, because it seems to me that when white people are involved and officers are called, the officers seem to be able to have the capacity to pause, to have restraint. And I don't always see that restraint when I'm reading about it. And part of the reason is that black skin is weaponized and criminalized. So in that split-second moment, when someone's making a decision, they're already scared because they've seen a black person, a black man or kid that may be tall, like the young man whose name I don't remember, who was shot by the officer who was sitting in his car, and the officer described him as the Hulk, a 14-year-old boy as the Hulk. So he was scared, not knowing if that person was armed, and I think that happens a lot. So.
Morning.
Good morning. My name is Tina, and I am consistently surprised at the timbre of these meetings and how self-congratulatory they always are. And I guess when you are, at heart, a criminal institution, you need that. So all due affordances, I appreciate that. So let's talk about this report. What is de-escalation? What does it involve? So police logic, the logic that's operative in this room, the logic that's been operative in this institution for the 150 years of its existence, establishes that de-escalation works at the end of the badge. So the resources are poured into this agency to train officers not to kill. That's the baseline assumption, right? That police respond violently and that they need to be trained not to. That's the logic we're working with here. And this is warped. That should not be the baseline assumption. And what we also need to understand, and to my mind, and I think to the mind of many civilians who don't have any affiliation with being paid here, we have the feeling that de-escalation is in fact a two-way street. It doesn't happen at the end of officers who need training. It involves community members. That's what we're talking about. We're talking about people who need help. We're talking about people who have mental illness, people who are struggling with housing issues, people who have been in and out of the carceral system. So civilians need training too. Civilians need de-escalation training strategies. So the money that's being used, this whole agenda is full of money being poured on this end of the de-escalation strategy, when money should be going to schools, to hospitals, to institutions that train us, that empower us not to be violent to you. And then you have no reason to pack heat. Look who has guns in this room. It's not us. Right. It's not us. And granted, there are situations where officers are threatened. I appreciate that. A lot of communities exist in very violent situations a lot of the time. Why are they violent? They don't have resources. Give resources back to people.
Yes. We have no other cards on this item?
I did put a speaker card in.
You did, sir.
Go ahead, sir.
Thank you. Thanks.
What's your name?
Hi. My name is John Dutton.
John.
In the last 15 years, I have done every firefighter, every police officer who have died in the line of duty in Flowers. There isn't one we haven't did. We've been to New York, Arizona, Las Vegas. I'm here, you want to talk about shootings. You have Enrique Trujillo that's in the hospital fighting for his life right now. He does have a wife and a child. I was there on Sunday. And also, to make a long story short, on Sunday, we put a wreath here in the lobby. It says, "Our Fallen Heroes, Happy Easter." We put them in 139 stations.
Sir, I'm going to ask you to hang and do this during public comment, okay? Because it's really not relating to this report. Can you wait for a couple of minutes?
Oh, I thought it was public comment. I'm sorry.
No.
Okay.
Okay, we'll get you back. Thank you, sir. Okay, do we have a motion to accept and file the department's report?
Yes, someone.
Second, all in favor? Aye. Anyone opposed? Okay, let's go to the chief's report.
Good morning, Commissioners.
Morning.
So I'm going
Morning,
to
Chief.
I'm going to provide significant instances and activities in the last week. I want to start by talking just briefly about 2 officer-involved shootings that occurred within a 36-hour span of time, where in both instances our officers, uniform officers, were fired on, and in one instance, a young officer was struck multiple times. And fortunately, I visited with him yesterday, and I want to just report publicly that he has stabilized, and he is expected to survive those injuries. I'll briefly talk about that officer-involved shooting as well as the second one, and then I'll get into the other activities this past week. On the officer-involved shooting, the first one on the 20th of April, about 9:21 at night in the 1720 block of East 51st Street. That's in the Newton area of Los Angeles, South Los Angeles. Newton gang officers, uniform officers, were following a silver BMW vehicle for where they witnessed and observed vehicle code violations. As they followed that vehicle, it came to a stop near the intersection of 51st and Long Beach Avenue, where the lone motorist exited and ran into the Pueblo del Rio housing development. The officers believed, based on their observations, that the individual was armed with a handgun and went in foot pursuit of the individual. As the officers were running near a set of apartments located at 1721 East 51st, a second individual, later identified as Mr. Curly Lee Duff, a male African-American, 39 years of age, fired a pistol at one of the officers, resulting in an officer-involved shooting. One of those officers, as well as Mr. Duff, was wounded by gunfire. Both were transported separately to a nearby medical center. Both of them are expected to survive. A handgun was recovered next to Mr. Duff at the scene. The driver of the BMW vehicle, which initially drew the officer's attention, is still outstanding. Our investigation continues as to his identity and involvement in this. Force Investigations, as well as Robbery Homicide Division, responded, as did the Office of the Inspector General and the District Attorney's Officer-Involved Shooting Rollout Team. I want to personally thank a number of other agencies, law enforcement agencies in the Los Angeles Basin area that responded in mass to this. We had a large ongoing scene and perimeter, in addition compounded by the significant and severe injury to our officer. And I was on scene and witnessed the partnership and the organization to identify the outstanding individual and attempt to apprehend him, as well as to conduct this investigation. As I said, that investigation will continue, and we are fortunate in this instance that we did not lose this officer. The second officer-involved shooting happened. Oh, I'm sorry.
I was going to wait until you were done, Chief, but I know I speak for all of the commission that we wish the officer a very speedy recovery for him and his family. We don't like to see anyone injured, certainly not in service to the city, and we're very heartened to hear that he's recovering.
Thank you. Thank you. The second incident occurred, as I indicated, yesterday morning at about 6:45 in the area of South Figueroa Street and West Gardena Boulevard. That's in the southeast area of the city. Uniformed officers were responding to a radio call of a man armed with a gun. In doing so, the officers were in the area of South Figueroa and Gardena when they encountered the individual we believe related to that radio call, later identified as Mr. David Flores, 36 years of age, male Hispanic. The officers immediately realized that Mr. Flores was armed with a handgun, and as they exited their vehicle, the officers were fired on by Mr. Flores, resulting in an officer-involved shooting. Mr. Flores was struck by multiple rounds and was treated at scene by the LA Fire paramedics, but succumbed to his injuries and died on scene. Both of the involved officers were not injured during this incident. There was a 9mm semi-automatic handgun that was recovered from the scene. Again, Force Investigation Division responded, as well as the Office of Inspector General and the District Attorney's rollout team. We had media on scene, and we did publish some accounts and photographs of not just a handgun that was recovered on scene, but a knife, as well as a ballistic impact to a passenger door of the officer's black and white that was on scene. In both these instances, there is body-worn video. Both these instances will be a subject of a critical incident review release. That will be well within the 45 days, I expect. And those instances represent now the second and the third and fourth officer-involved shooting year-to-date. While I'm on that, I'll just briefly talk about those statistics. With 4 officer-involved shootings this year, each of them involving a hit or the individual we're shooting at being struck by gunfire. 2 of those 4 resulted in a fatality. Last year's numbers were 11 by this date officer-involved shootings, which represents a 64% reduction from last year. And our 4-year average is just under 14, which is a 71% reduction. In regards to the number of fatalities this year being 2, last year at this time that number was 7, which is a 67% reduction, 4 fewer lives, as well as well below the 4-year average, which is just over 5. Moving over to other significant events that happened this past week, I was happy to attend and honor for members of this department to attend the Urban League Whitney M. Young 46th Annual Award Gala that was held in Hollywood area last Thursday, where Mr. Fred Ali, the president and CEO of the Weingart Foundation, was awarded the first, in the first instance, the John Mack Legacy Award. Tremendous institution. The Urban League's work in and particularly in South Los Angeles, but in their efforts in Los Angeles, we are encouraged with their leadership and their renewal effort to really develop jobs and opportunities for Angelenos. I also attended the YMCA of Metro Los Angeles 61st Annual Good Friday Breakfast, and later was honored to be a part of the LA Mission Easter for the Homeless that happened on Good Friday, and where thousands of individuals had the blessings of a meal provided by a number of volunteers sponsored by the LA Mission. Additionally, this past week, we attended the Mayor's State of the City last Wednesday, where he released his proposed budget that is now before the City Council. I am encouraged by that budget, not only for its support of this department, but its support of added services for homelessness, people experiencing homelessness, and both in housing as well as supportive services. Much needed services, I believe, to improve the quality of life and the safety of Los Angeles. Within the budget for the Los Angeles Police Department is resources that will allow us, upon its adoption, to open up the Harbor Jail. This is a facility that was opened briefly in 2009, and because of the severe recession that the city experienced, had to be mothballed. So this is going to be a significant improvement for us with the opening of this. It'll allow us to have officers remain much closer to their area of assignment and much more efficient in their activities. Additionally, there are monies that have been set aside for our efforts to improve our outreach and recruitment of African American candidates as well as women for sworn police officers. And we are also seeing continued support of the restoration of our civilian staffing, which will allow us again to free up additional sworn personnel for field assignments in lieu of them now working civilian type positions. There is still a maintenance or maintaining of our sworn hiring at our present level. And lastly, a significant investment in the department's efforts of modernizing technology is being supported by the proposed budget, where additional monies are going to allow us, I believe, to make the first step in modernizing a very antiquated system in which we take primarily reports but a number of other administrative functions. Let me move over to the effort of that modernization, by the way, along with our work with the Police Foundation, is to effectively reduce the amount of time an officer spends doing administrative tasks from the current levels today, which is approximately more than 50%, to reduce that by 50%, which will allow us to increase the presence in our patrols and in our streets, in our neighborhoods by 50%. That involvement, without having to hire an additional police officer, without having to hire additional staffing, I believe will build and deepen, again, our relationships with our communities by affording our officers added time to have conversations, to have engagements, and not simply be responding to radio calls after radio call. Regarding our crime statistics, we have continued in April now with some upward pressures on particularly violent crime, particularly shootings, shooting victims. I want to report that year to date, we have a total of 74 homicides. Last year to date, that number was 72. So it's just under a 3% increase. Year to date, we still remain under 3.6% in overall violent crime. That's 306 fewer violent crimes today versus a year ago. Our overall Part 1 crime reduction, with a reduction in property crimes in every category, it now stands just below 7%, which is 2,673 fewer Part 1 crimes. In regards to our victims that have been shot, we have 58 additional shooting victims this year versus last, which is a 25% increase. The nature of the increase is almost entirely in gang-related shootings. And as we look at that work, we are looking at it both to what happened last year, but also in years past. Last year we had an exceedingly safe year, particularly in South Los Angeles. That's being challenged this year. We have seen most recently in March and into the middle part of April increased pressure there. The gang-related crime is up 166 additional gang-related crimes this year versus last. That's just under a 17% increase. And in regards to the gang-related shootings, those numbers are up 27%. South Bureau represents the vast majority, South Los Angeles, of the increase in gang crime at 36% rate of increase, followed by Central Bureau at 10%. However, in looking at this data, we also are encouraged that in looking at 2, 3, 5, 10 years back, these are still numbers that are well below those earlier levels. However, this is not a department nor a community that looks at these statistics and doesn't recognize that each of these involve an individual, a life, a person's existence and the safety of their neighborhoods. So we are, while we're keeping in perspective this increase in relationship to trends and overall trends, is still some of the safest times in Los Angeles in our history. We are doubling down with our gang reduction youth development resources, our outreach in our communities, our partnerships with all of our stakeholders to interrupt and to take off track this recent increase in gang-related shootings and gang-related violence. I'm encouraged by that. I will say that Saturday night on the scene involving the officer-involved shooting in Newton Division, Ms. Ann Trimbley, the head of the Mayor's Gang Reduction Youth Development Office, was on scene, on present, with outreach workers, with engagement in the Pueblo del Rio housing development to soothe rumors and to address concerns relative to that encounter there, that expression of violence. So we see our grid partners every day. We see our faith leaders regularly, and we are engaged and will be committed to turning this around as we enter the summer months. Lastly, let me move over to our traffic before I get to the personnel numbers. On our traffic collisions, today we are I'll start with our cyclists. We're basically even with the number of serious injuries and deaths involving cyclists at 34. Last year that number was 34. Our motor vehicle versus pedestrians are essentially flat with 160 serious injuries or deaths this year by motor vehicles versus pedestrian. Last year that number was 159. And our overall traffic collisions are slightly down at just under 16,000 versus last year, 1.6% reduction.
Chief, do we keep a separate account for scooter collisions with all the new scooters out there?
So we're just beginning that process now. We are concerned about the scooter, the proliferation of those devices, the thousands that are being added. I want to applaud that this is an emerging technology. It's an emerging area of transport. And the convenience of this we recognize with the millions of potential trips that can be taken in relative convenience. However, the safety is a growing concern. It was a young man that was, just as a point of reference, that was involved in a fatal hit and run, 31 years of age, visiting from Dallas at the intersection of Vine and Sunset that was struck and killed by a motorist as he was in a crosswalk on one of those devices. So we are mindful that with this enhanced technology that there are people readily taking advantage of it, very convenient to move a couple blocks or longer distances. We just want to, but we want to caution those users that the use of a helmet is extremely recommended. It's required if you're under 18 years of age, but as an adult, these are devices that are moving at 15, 20 miles an hour, and in a collision with a vehicle or a fixed object can result in a significant, if not fatal, injury without proper helmet protection.
So statistically, that one is shown as a pedestrian. It's not separate. A pedestrian and a person on a scooter are the same thing right now, but we're trying to separate them?
I believe it's a cyclist, so
I see.
But I'll
I
come
see.
back with you
Okay.
on that.
Okay.
But this is again, I think this, Mike, like shared transports were 5 to 7 years ago, an emerging area of transportation. This is what we're envisioning now with these, with the proliferation of these in and across Los Angeles. I'm encouraged by the Department of Transportation, their governance of this, and they're issuing licenses. I think they're establishing good controls to police the vendors of these, to keep them orderly and in a manner that doesn't interfere with roadways and with sidewalks. But the people who are using them must recognize that these devices do offer some peril if not used responsibly and defensively with a motoring public that oftentimes is distracted in their driving by texting and other activities rather than paying attention to the roadway. Let me move lastly over to our personnel statistics. Year to date, presently we have our sworn personnel at 10,043 personnel, and the civilian staffing is at 2,986. Our reserve officers are at 387, and our cadets number 1,428. That concludes my comments, and I'll be happy to answer any questions or concerns.
Commissioner, questions of the chief, or do you want to?
Yeah,
Go ahead.
Yeah, I wanted to go back to the comments about the gang activity. And the question that I had was in trying to look at some of the data on the website, and it appeared to me, is often the case, a user issue, but it appeared to me that the gang stats on the website haven't been updated since 2009.
Oh.
And so I'm wondering, one, if you could look and have someone look and tell us, one, if that's the case, and if it is, why it is, and what's there, because the comments that you were just sharing, I think, kind of underscore the importance of continuing to keep our finger on the pulse of that area, and I'd like to just kind of understand what we're doing in that regard on data. Thank you.
Well, let me say that our internal numbers are not that don't have that lag time. But I apologize to the public that that's an area that apparently has not been attended to. We'll get that resolved.
Thank you.
We have public comments on the chief's report.
Yes, we have 3 comment cards,
Okay.
Mr. Herman, Gina Viola, and Jonathan Foster.
So, in your statement, Michael Moore, for the record, in your discussion about protection and clause, you stated that your data or your so-called memory, recollection of homicides was down. But the public here knows for a fact that homicide's on a rise. I'm not going to mention that of what Eric Holden did to a gentleman in the South Central area. But the reason why the public is at arms, it's apparent. They fear the police. Some people fear me, the trooper. And all I'm doing is talking about race neutral. On its face and value, a pattern and practice that the public fears the police, and that's the reason why your statistics reflect a negative correspondence from those of us in the public. And it's unfortunate that you, the chief of police, has to put up this prejudicial manner of a report because it's biased, it's based on prejudice, and it falls on racial profilings a white nigger like myself, simply because I wear a mask.
This isn't about you, it's about the chief's report.
Well, I'm a gangster, bro.
Okay.
I'm a gangster
Next
like
speaker,
you,
please.
Mr. Sobroff.
Next speaker.
I got 18 seconds. You're going to violate the civil rights of the
I
Brown
just
Act?
said you're off topic. Next speaker.
I'm talking about homicides. I'm
The
talking
next
about
speaker is
the
Gina
criminal
Viola.
I'm going to ask you to
activity.
leave the meeting.
Pardon me?
I'm going to ask you to leave the meeting. If
Fuck
that's
your
okay.
gay son. I'm leaving.
Okay.
How's that?
Mr. Herman needs to leave the meeting.
I'm leaving. Can I get my shit?
So in your critical reports, critical incidents, you didn't mention the sunbather that was run over by an LAPD officer. I believe it was yesterday or the day before. Do you not consider that a critical incident? I thought we would hear more about that today. Also, I want to discuss the tweet that you made during the Nipsey Hussle procession, where you
Herman, quit
tied
disrupting our meeting and get out of our meeting.
the shooting of the 4 people that was 50 blocks away to that procession. It felt very irresponsible to me that you did that. And it went viral. And I feel like you did it to answer all of the negative press that the LAPD has had lately. And you are, again, showing it as black on black crime as reason for you to exist and reason for you to be in those neighborhoods. I did not see any correction that you made to that assertion. What I saw later was you then patted yourself on the back for keeping everybody safe during that procession. So which is it? Did 4 people die as a result of that procession or get shot during that procession, or did you keep them safe? I don't know how it could be both. Also, I found it very troubling that you use the words, you talked about the unnecessary violence that needs to stop. Why is that unnecessary violence? Isn't it all unnecessary violence? I don't see you use those words very often, but you chose to use them during that tweet. So I just found that very troubling. I've been coming for 2 years. For 2 years, I consistently hear about gang crime being down, down, down. Suddenly it's up. And again, I think this is to respond to the bad press that the LAPD has had. For the past 6 months, every paper has an article about the racist policing, the racist data-driven policing in this.
Next speaker, please.
Jonathan Foster, please.
Mr. Foster.
Do so.
Hi, Jonathan Foster. Sorry, I started screaming. We're supposed to de-escalate, and I started screaming, so sorry. All right, you didn't talk about the sawed-off shotgun guy because we got postponed from last week. There was a guy who was white walking around with the sawed-off shotgun, and not a word about this. And I said I would have shot him too. Hey, sir, can you put the gun down? And he doesn't put the gun down. Boom, boom, boom. And I cannot believe how a white guy is walking around L.A. with a sawed-off shotgun. Is that the stupidest thing you ever heard in your life? With as much problems that are going on about how many problems are brought on the rest of the world by white. I just couldn't believe what I had heard. And your gang units talking to the gangs about not committing crime you didn't arrest the gangs on conspiracy because they're committing crime, you see. And I know everybody's got a position on gangs, but you didn't bring the crime down just because you're talking to them. They make a decision. See, the whole thing is everyone's approach is to get the suspect to comply, to change their mind. And they're not going to change their mind. And what you need is head-to-toe body armor. I've said this kind of stuff before. You need to send out the people in groups of 6 to 8 at a time. And they got this budget rigged up so you can't do that. I mean, I would have this thing running like a sewing machine. You couldn't even hear if it was working. Is that on or not? Yeah, I know how to do that, but I'm not in position, you see. I also looked at the Brian Rodriguez video, and I watched how a guy, if that's what it is, he stabs somebody, and the guy's in the house bleeding, and he can't get to him. And they're screaming bloody murder because you murdered somebody out of their family, but the guy is in there bleeding to death. And I can tell you, if this guy stabbed me, I would have beat the and his family. That's ridiculous. You can come stab somebody, and then the police can't get in there to do anything about it. I mean, there's some aspects about all of this that's just really got their heads cut off. And I just wish people would do what Jesus said.
Next speaker, please.
That's the last speaker on this item, sir.
Public comments? How many do we have?
We have 8 public comments.
Okay.
We have
Let's let the gentleman speak who we stopped before, sir. Yes.
John Dunton.
Like I've said, I've done all the police officers' funerals and firefighters for the last 15 years, if they passed away on the line of duty. I do got to say that I do believe in the LAPD. I do believe in Chief Moore, and most police chiefs in California do support Chief Moore. But I'm here on a very isolated incident. I got to report this. I cannot let it go. On Sunday, I did go to the hospital. I got more than 300 phone calls from law enforcement to send flowers for Enrique Trujillo, which is in the hospital. I did go there. We gave a get well card signed by more than 150 officers. And so I left the hospital. All the media was there. I never talked to the media. So I get a phone call 3 hours later. I was accused by the LAPD command staff that I set up a GoFundMe without getting authorization. I never set up that GoFundMe because I know the policy and procedures. You're going to go through the Employees Assistance Unit, the Police Protective. I know. But I was accused. I had all the media calling me. I had 3 members of the LAPD command staff actually calling to yell at me. But then they found out that it was somebody from Newton Division that did it, not me. My main reason why I'm here is because we have a captain at Newton Division. He doesn't give a damn about this officer. I'm getting phone calls from Newton Division officers. He doesn't care. And I'm concerned, we want to open a Blue Ribbon account, we want to do stuff, but, they're scared to speak out because this captain don't want to do anything for the officer, so I'm here to speak on behalf of the officer and the officers at Newton Division. Something has to be done. It's not a joke. The captain doesn't want to do anything. He's turning a blind eye. And it's really sad that this has to happen. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Next.
Gina Viola, followed by Jonathan Foster and Jeffrey.
So I want to talk about the hostility in this room and these meetings. I don't know what happened this morning, Mr. Soboroff, but you started off today particularly hostile and particularly, it was just so troubling the way the meeting began. And it's like that week after week. And I'm sure it is frustrating to hear from the same people the same things over and over again. But can you imagine how frustrating it is as a member of the community, not paid to be here, to have numerous speakers get up here and speak against things that you immediately ratify as quickly as you can? And that happens week after week after week. So you can't control the racism in this room. What makes us think you're able to control it out in the public and in the community? You cannot. You do not. If we have to have policing, officers should live in the neighborhoods that they patrol. They should not come from miles away and have no stake and no say. I know you have spoken many times, Chief, about your foot patrolmen and policing and people getting more into the neighborhood and getting to know people, but they should live in those communities if they're going to be policing them. They shouldn't be coming from far, far away. There was an article in the LA Times on Sunday that was super troubling. Cindy Chang, I don't know if she's here today, but clearly she's, I just super troubled by that article. And one of the things in it was a comment about a stop that took place, a routine stop. And the officers didn't find any reason to have stopped them. after they did, but they boasted about filling out a field interview card. I watched a girl's life ruined with field interview cards. I watched a jury throw her away because the prosecution put up field interview card after field interview card up. And they are dangerous.
Mr. Foster.
Hi, I'm Jonathan Foster. The Supreme Court decision that I talked about, the use of force, that we need to be speaking about that all day long, all week, all month, until we get that straightened out. It needs to actually be, that decision needs to be put on the ballot, and the people of LA County need to make that decision about how the police do this. The other one that I've stated before, you need 5 years minimum shooting training before you can go out onto the sidewalk as a police officer. 5 years monthly, and once you're on the force, you need to go to the monthly shooting games location like the U.S. military does and continue to go monthly shooting, because some officers may go 5-10 years and never take the gun out. And that's a good thing, but they need to be going monthly, though, to the training. Yeah, why don't we do that? That'd be a good one. A sawed-off shotgun. You know, I looked at Wikipedia. It talked about how it was always used with crime, but they never talk about how that's a great bird gun. See, when you're bird hunting, you need a gun you can go like this, because the birds get up and they go behind you. You got a nice long gun like I used to have. You can't kind of get around there, but you can take a sawed-off shotgun and go boom, and have 3 or 4 birds and eat well that night. That's really what it is. So when a white guy's walking around L.A. with a bird gun, you know he's up to no good. So I would have shot him too. Sucks, though, that you had to shoot somebody. That's what does suck. It really does. The idea that this stuff hasn't already taken place and you're doing a 150-year anniversary, like, it's just hard to accept. It's just really hard to accept. But if all the improvements come through, boy, we'll be doing good. And I can tell you, it's a hard job. I wouldn't want to do it. But it's got so many broken problems with it. And maybe you guys might figure it out one day.
Thank you, sir. Next.
The next speaker, Jeffrey, followed by Carrie Ungerman.
Hello, board. This is an interesting exercise in civics for me sometimes to come out here and observe and participate. I don't always get the sense that the police department itself, I guess, is very invested in this edifice. For instance, like, I follow the Twitter a lot, like LAPD Twitter. It always seems very, I guess, as some previous people were saying, like, there could be a certain sense of distortion of what you put out to the public, as opposed to kind of just like neutral information. It seems like there's usually a lot of spin on things. So that was just something that popped into my head. 2 minutes, all right. ACS Security is a private security company in Bel Air, Westwood, Brentwood area, West Side, where my family sometimes plants their flag. I think that private security companies are kind of an issue that maybe that's something that you should be aware of. Some of these people are doing like police type activities, like following people or detaining them in public, for instance. So I'm sure you probably don't care that much, but to me that kind of bothers me. Like, it seems like you have all these laws, right? Like peace officers and powers of arrest and things. But then if you just have a private security company and they kind of like have a lot of friends, they just start acting like cops. I don't know. So anyway, yeah, you know, you have all your powers. I think from my point of view, the best way for you to protect your power is to like use it honestly and to prevent the private police forces. Because I think even most people here would agree that's like a regression to a lower state.
Next speaker, please.
First of all, I would like to acknowledge that police officers have a very hard job, and I know that they work hard, and I do appreciate a lot of times what the different officers do in the department. It's also, but it's also so worrying about the disproportionate amount of black people, indigenous people, people of color being killed. And years ago, when I first lived here, 30 years ago, I'd be driving down the street, and every time I saw, anecdotally, most of the people I saw outside their cars were people of color. I want to talk about something that I mentioned before. I know that white supremacy is a trigger word. As soon as people hear supremacy, as soon as white people hear white supremacy, they turn off, they stop listening, they stop making eye contact, stuff like that. But it's not the same as white supremacists. I would think that all of you, I would think none of you and no one in this room would consider themselves a racist. But I also believe that we all have prejudices, or I'll start with myself, prejudices, and I have biases, and some of them I don't even know. I am aware of a lot because in the past few years I've been examining that. And at the end of the day, all the white people in this room, whether we intersect with being Jewish or being a white Muslim or being a white woman or a white gay person, all of the people who are white benefit every single day from the white supremacy in our country and how our laws were first founded. Remember, it was white men who wrote the laws, the original laws, and it was for only white men.
Thank you.
Okay, and the next three speakers, Sherry, Veron, Michael, John Avalos, and Tina.
Those are the last four?
The last four, sir.
Okay. Sherry, not here. John Avalos?
Michael, John Avalos,
Is Michael
and
here?
Tina.
Morning, Michael.
How you doing today? I've been arrested 4 times by the police, and every time I was innocent. So I guess it's the color of my skin. 2 times I was arrested for selling on the streets. And now the city council done passed a law where you can sell on the streets. Plus Governor Brown, he signed a bill where we can sell on the streets now. But I get arrested for that. These other immigrants and other people don't get arrested only because I'm black. But since y'all so cruel to us and done so much bad to us, and Donald Trump just signed this bill, H.R. 1242. It's for August the 19th coming up. It's going to be 400 years of mistreatment in this country. So, and these good white people here trying to tell you bad white people to treat us good, but you're going to bring this karma on y'all starting August the 19th. 400 years going to be up, so why don't y'all just let us go, give us reparations, and let us leave this country because of the mistreatment, the murders, the poison you're messing up the nature, you're messing up the fruit, the GMO foods, you're doing all these killings naturally all the time. So why don't y'all just let us go, because we tired, man, we mistreated, we can't get jobs, and Kamala Harris said to give us reparation for discrimination, for the Jim Crow, and 248 years of free labor. So I'm just asking you to give us something, let us go, because the people upstairs is coming back to judge y'all for this 400 year of mistreatment. It's nothing to be afraid of, but for me, but y'all gonna have it coming for you. So can't you do something good to us? And even though Donald Trump did sign this bill, 400 years of mistreatment, I don't get it why he would sign a bill like that. And we've been through all this hell, but give us something and just let us leave, and we get out of this country and go.
John Avalos.
Let me see. The prison, isn't that the prison that lady was talking about? There's a lady that comes all by herself all the time. Open that prison. Is that the one you were talking about in Harbor? The Harbor jail, you called it? She called it a prison. You build it, they will come.
Yep, that's it.
Your officers now, they're going to get more aggressive because they can get more jobs for their compadres to be police officers because they're going to fill that prison. They're going to need more officers. This is terrible. Where is she? She was always here by herself, yet we're always here. Together. It doesn't even matter. I'm not mad at you, Mr. Moore. I support you. That man that says that we don't support you, the police, that's ridiculous. Why would we be here if we don't support the police and we don't support you? Why would I be here? Sandra's here today. She was absent twice in a row. And before that, she was absent a lot. I don't know, you all. It's evident that these are political positions you all have. We still don't respect you all because it's not a independent body of people from the community that oversee the police. It is not that. Sandra, why would you never have your meetings at Centro? Why are these meetings never held at Centro del Pueblo? That's interesting. I wonder why. And we've been clamoring for 3 years to hold your meetings in the community, but it would be too expensive because look at all the police you're going to need over there at that meeting, and every 2 minutes they rotate. You're going to need to do that at all these local places to protect you. And there's been so many police killings that it's getting.
Last speaker, please.
Hi. I appreciate the second opportunity to speak. I also want to uplift what Gina has said because I have a tremendous amount of respect for the way she comes here and consistently speaks truth to you without hostility, and I'm trying to learn from her quite a bit, so thank you, Gina. I appreciate how hard your job is. I really do mean that. This is a complicated city to solve problems in, really any urban space. The problems are massive. Homelessness is a problem that has no single good solution. The kinds of crime that we actually are struggling with in different neighborhoods don't have single clean answers of how to disappear. But the reality of the situation is that what has been on the books for 150 years isn't working. That's why people come here every week, to try and get you to understand that. Because I really actually do believe that every single person here, like all of these gentlemen with badges on and guns on their hips who don't want to look at me, I firmly do believe that they chose to go into service trying to parrot what's on these walls. I actually do believe that you want to serve the community, but the institution that you're a part of is not rigged to do that. It's just not. And I'm really sorry that today you had to, Mr. Sobroff, that you had to hear that kind of abuse that you heard earlier. I know we can wait that's very taxing on every single one of you emotionally. Hearing this kind of rage that's directed at you must be really hard. And going home to your families with that kind of stress, admittedly, understandably, I empathize. I do. But the level of stress that this institution produces, maintains, and sustains in certain communities of color in particular is so violent, is so aggressive, that honestly, the kind of stress you guys are experiencing here pales in comparison to the kind of help that these communities need. So all due respect, but you're all full of shit. I'm sorry.
And we have no other cards on this item, sir. We do have one card for 1G. Would you like to revisit 1G through 1J?
Yeah, let's go ahead.
Okay, we have, I think she's the one that had the card. Tina? Okay, we have no other cards on any of the items, sir.
Motion for approval of G through J, 1G through J. Second, all those in favor? Aye, okay, let's go to the closed session items.
We have no cards, sir.
Okay.
The Board of Police Commissioners will now recess into closed session to discuss items number 5A1 and 5A2 in accordance with Government Code 54957. The Board of Police Commissioners has concluded its work in closed session. We are back in open session. In closed session, item number 5A1 was discussed and the chief's recommendations were unanimously adopted. In closed session, item number 5A2 was discussed and the chief's recommendations were unanimously adopted. Madam Vice President, is there a motion to adjourn?
Second? There's a second. All in favor?
Aye. Meeting adjourned.
Board of Police Commissioners stands in recess or concludes for the day. There we go.